I really should test out my slides and see just how big they are before I make the final draft. But wow, it's so big. But isn't Clark just like super handsome? Sorry. He's mine. He just had a birthday this past week, and sweet 16, because he's so sweet. And he really wanted a certain kind of jewelry. And when I was looking at the jewelry, there were some things about it that was kind of maybe disturbing. And I'm like, okay, but I really want to affirm my son, and he wants jewelry, so okay. Anyway, so I investigated, and then I, went to the site, and I put my email in, and so then I get an email from the company, and it's actually this personal note from the one who started it, and I just wanted to read this to you because it's relevant. It says, "Hey, Nicole," because he knows me. "You want to know something I haven't really told anyone? It's that I'm insecure. I was chubbier as a kid and the youngest of 3 brothers. My parents were loving, but my mom battled with depression and my dad was gone a lot. Not sharing this so you feel bad for me, but maybe you can understand a little more about why I do what I do. You see, at an early age, I figured out that I was funny. People seemed to like me more when I was being funny, even my family, LOL. My brothers didn't mind me around, and I loved seeing my mom and dad smile. And because I could make people laugh as I got older, people thought I was fun and wanted to hang out with me more. Then I got into style, found my passion for vintage clothes and jewelry, and I loved how it made me feel better about myself. I regularly scour the local thrift shops for the best fits, but good jewelry was always hard to find. When I was a senior in high school, I realized I wasn't alone. People would always compliment me on my style, and I would always share how and where I got my stuff. Then it hit me. I should find it for them and try to make a little money at it. After all, my grades weren't that great, and college seemed more like my parents' dream than my own. Plus, I was young and kind of stupid, which ultimately worked in my favor, I think, and that's where it all began. To make a long story short, I started flipping vintage clothes online, and that ultimately led me to my true passion, jewelry. I think we all suffer from insecurity to some degree or another. And I honestly don't think it ever fully goes away. In fact, I'm learning to embrace it. And here's something that's not so secret. I still love making people smile and feel good. Whether it's through memes on my page, conversations on live, or dripping you out. Ask Clark what that means. It literally gives me purpose in life. And for that, I can't thank you enough. Now, you really didn't think I was going to write you a deeply personal email without reminding you that there's literally less than 2 hours left to get 22% off anything available to us on your site. And when you're all done, let me know how our products make you feel. I'll read some tonight on my Instagram live on my personal account. Thank you again for supporting me and the team. I'll never stop telling you that because I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Love, Will. I know, it's so sweet. But I loved that. I don't know, it really moved me because it was so personal the way it sounded and everything, and it was sent directly. It wasn't like just on the about where you have to kind of look for who started the company or whatever. And I thought, okay, he doesn't sound bad, and the jewelry comes from, a beautiful spot. But it does say on the website, hard jewelry it's called hard jewelry. Was started with the idea to create custom jewelry for the younger people like me so they could feel less weird and more like themselves. And what a beautiful thing, because especially as you're growing up, and teenagers in particular, but I think we all are like this, you don't really feel comfortable in your own skin sometimes. a lot of the time. And that's his purpose. And so anyway, I was looking at the jewelry, and one of them, it's called Religion is War. And it sounds like blasphemous, but the point is that most of our wars are born out of religious differences, Ferdinand notwithstanding, although it's still a belief system. And that war is difficult. I mean, war actually is easy to get into. And also it looked like a cross. It looks like Jesus' crucifix, but it's a distorted Jesus, and it's battle axes in the sign of the cross. So I'm like, I have to get that because this is really good. It's disturbing, but it's a really good point because war is disturbing, and what we do with religion is disturbing because it is so easy to get into. But peace is hard. Of all the letters attributed to Paul, Ephesians is one of the least likely to have been written by Paul himself. But he was definitely, probably he, influenced by Paul, a disciple of Paul. And it reads more like a prayer meditation than any of the other letters. And there's some sense of the type of conflict that's addressed in the other letters, but it doesn't really show up so much here. Rather, it's more of a reflection on power, the heavenly realms. And the reader has, by virtue of Christ's work, life, death, and resurrection, in that this power is now also ours. Further, this power is what makes the character of the church unique. Unique in a way that it behaves and orients itself all to the glory of God. That's what the writer of Ephesians is trying to get across. We orient ourselves in this way. And so, when there's some question here over whether to be circumcised and what physical circumcision indicates, the author of Ephesians reminds them that all of this that we're doing here, this church thing, it's all because Jesus, right? And I love that the writer doesn't over-focus on this conflict here. Rather, this person only has eyes for Jesus. And it's maintained that the primary characteristic of Jesus' act and being is that of peace. That's what Jesus is all about, making peace. So in the Greek, Eirenic is the Greek word. And so my website, I call it Nicole, because I conflated the two words. But to be Eirenic means to be aimed at peace, oriented toward reconciliation. It's a direction, it's a goal, and it's an orientation. One's whole being endeavoring always to be about peace. It's a bearing, like ships and submarines. They need to be locked in on their bearing or they get lost at sea. If we're not about peace, if we're not about being oriented toward reconciliation, we too will be lost at sea. We're lost. That's how wars start. Tossed about by every wind of doctrine and every time that I'm criticized or my perspective is different from somebody else's, or somebody does something that irritates me or challenges my position. Tossed about, throws me off. We're called to be agents of peace, instruments of peace. The Ephesians, as with all the other churches addressed in the New Testament, seems to be concerned about specific behaviors, outward signs. But they have nothing to do with living out what Jesus describes and models for us. and that which he already accomplished. He already accomplished this through it all. And circumcision is a common topic as it's so intimately entwined with the Jewish faith tradition. What are some of the topics that keep coming up in our conversations that divide us? But here the writer blows it off because, again, his eyes are on Jesus. It's just a human thing done to human flesh. No biggie. Jesus redeemed everything about our flesh by his flesh, his body embodied. It's all good now. And it's all unified now. There should not be any separation. All flesh, all humans are now made right. It's a future thing, and it's now. And it happened. It's eternal. We were already right in the beginning, right? When humans were first created. But we allowed our vision to be distorted by deciding that we knew better than the one who spoke everything into being. And we lost our God sight, our divine vision that sees into each other's souls. And we became nearsighted, unable to get past the surface, the behavior. We spend a great deal of time concerned about other people's behavior. What they're wearing, how she speaks, where he hangs out, how they do a thing. When Moses saw the bush that burned but was not consumed, he went to check it out. We know this story well. When Moses saw the bush that burned, he came to it and looked at it, but then God spoke through it. And Moses was afraid. But the scripture tells us that he wasn't afraid of this bush thing. Not that it was on fire and not being consumed. Moses was afraid to look at God. Why? Was he afraid to find out truths that might challenge his current lifestyle? You bet he was. He had a cush life right then. He had a beautiful wife, he had a couple of children, he had a secure job, a father-in-law who supported him and loved him, and no one bothering him about what he believed or didn't. And if Moses looked at God, he will see the truth of God's heart, God's deep, unfailing, abiding love for God's people. And Moses might have to give a hoot. I wrote something else. And he'd have to test what he says he believes about God. If he really believes this about God, it would be tested if he looked. And maybe this is why we're afraid to look at each other, to really look. First, we're likely to be asked to be vulnerable ourselves, to show our true selves. But we might also see God in the other if we're really looking. And we might be challenged about the truths that we've been holding on to so securely that maybe not be about Jesus. Might reveal what I've always believed. But if we become oriented toward a way of being, our whole orientation, our truest selves, while looking directly at God, what Jesus did and taught, how others respond to us won't matter so much. How they act in our presence, it becomes less important. In fact, and this might sound kind of selfish and self-serving, if I focus only on being what I know is good and right, and according to my unique image bearing of the divine, knowing who I am in the way that God has made me to be, uniquely, not what anybody else thinks, I then become a powerful conduit of peace. If I am being and oriented toward being who God has made me to be and growing and learning to be that, I became an agent of peace and a peace bringer and a reconciler. Love. Jesus brought our attention back to God by being here with us. Piercing time-space, to be in our space and show us and teach us and empower us by the power we already had but forgot. And remind us that we are what we are made to do, how we are to be oriented. Jesus actually reverses this cultural concept of power, like having control over others, by exemplifying vulnerability and sacrifice and acceptance and love. Jesus showed us how to do it. He remains open and contextual. He's sometimes in the synagogue, sometimes at the dinner table of the tax collector, fishing the boat with the poor, at a well with the people you're not supposed to associate with, and a woman, and accepting a drink. He was there with everyone. Everyone. Jesus goes to the ones that the religious leaders would never go. Everyone society deemed unworthy, unclean. Jesus spoke the word name clean. Jesus spoke truth of who they are, and that is where the healing really happens, right? The healing came as a result of being accepted by God with us, seeing the truth and believing the truth. Jesus said, let's go to the other side. Come away with me so we can rest. I will make you lie down for a little while. But then the people found them, and they could be irritated by this and cop an attitude. Jesus told us to come and rest. But they had eyes for Jesus, and Jesus had compassion on the people because they were lost. And they wanted to be oriented toward him. So the apostles kept their bearing and were filled with compassion for them too. As soon as you leave someone out, there's no peace. As long as you hold on to a judgment about another, there cannot be reconciliation. And we no longer live out what we say that we believe, not accepting the reconciliatory work of Jesus. Jesus reconciled apokatalaxi. Jesus reconciled all people. He broke down the dividing wall of hostility. In Ephesians, the same phrase is used a little bit differently. Not just breaking down the wall of hostility, but killed hostility. Put it to death. This is the work that Jesus did. He reconciled by making peace through the blood of his cross, has now reconciled his fleshly body through death. And this is not an intellectual exercise. Peace was made through Jesus' flesh and blood. He embodied peace. He enacted in real life reconciliation. That is who we are. And that is the power that we have been given. In Hebrew, the word is ratzah. And it's also translated as received with favor. Reconciliation is receiving with favor. It's not just saying, okay, we can get along. All right, let's just get along. But it's with favor, accepted, pleased with. It's about being delighted in each other. That's peace. That's reconciliation. God speaks to the people as my chosen, in whom my soul delights. We all long for wholeness, right? We don't want to be divided. To be who we are and entirely. It's exhausting to hold together all the pieces of a self, the expectation of another, and still another. The desire to be someone or something else, the disquieting sense that I am not enough. And trying to present all these people at the right time, pieces at the right time, and to the right people, it's grueling work. It's a lot of work. But Jesus did something. In Jesus' flesh, he made all the groups into one. There's no longer divisions. By being himself whole and holy. God and created being. He became utterly vulnerable in body and spirit, separated from himself, God's self, in order to unify everything. Reconcile all creation to the source of everything so that we could be free to be at peace with each other, with God, with all creation. And he didn't do this with force or with bullying or shaming, trying to win some to his side or his team. No, he walked with those considered to be on the other team. He asked for a drink. He accepted invitations to supper, took their pain and exclusion and illnesses seriously and healed them by treating them with dignity, with regard, as humans worth being with. Can we be a place of healing and healing peace if we're divided? So then, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are citizens with the saints and also members of the household of God, built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the cornerstone. In him, the whole structure is joined together and grows into a holy temple. A holy temple in the Lord, in whom you are also built together spiritually into a dwelling place for God. That's who we are, a dwelling place for God. Peace is hard. But really, the work is already done. We just need to look at God. Follow in the way of Jesus. Be aimed at peace. That's our goal, oriented toward reconciliation. And I wonder, I'm betting that all of us have someone that you need to be reconciled with, to be an agent of peace too. And I wonder if you would consider, first in prayer, meditating on your bearing, your presence in Jesus' presence, and ask for an opening, the opportunity to be oriented toward this person, whoever, and be filled like Jesus and the apostles with compassion for that person, and see God in them. And as if each of us are oriented that way together, if we all do this together, the law with all its commandments and ordinances are abolished. The law is killed. We can then make peace, reconciled in one body to become what we say that we want to be. Real people doing real life, bringing people to real faith. And experience real relationships in real time. Join the movement. Holy God, your peace is beyond anything we can know and experience, or understand, rather. Saturate us all in your peace. Let it fill every cell of our being, down to the pores. And burn in us without us being consumed. Because you are a fire when we let you be that in us. Thank you. That this is all that you want to do. You want to make us bringers of peace, instruments of peace. And so we are letting you right now. We are vulnerable to you and to each other and letting it all down so that we can be filled with your peace. And we are grateful. Thank you. Thank you that we can come to you and ask these things. Amen.